I'm just saying if you're looking to get to your revenue goals quicker, if you're looking to obtain more money in the bank faster, the closer you get to a 3-to-1 spend, the quicker you're going to get to hitting your goals.
The following marketing information and discussion is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as professional guidance or consultancy. Just enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to The Buyer's Journey by Comexis, a discussion-based podcast focused on gaining your business a competitive advantage by eliminating marketing confusion and making your digital marketing work for you. I'm Matthew McGrory, the social media content producer here at Comexis.
I'm Len Moore, the managing partner at Comexis.
And I'm Josh Lyons, the digital marketing coordinator here at Comexis.
So in our last episode, we talked about the state of the industry and why it is so difficult at times to gain a competitive advantage for your business. And our conclusion was basically that you're probably not spending enough on your digital marketing campaigns, and in addition, you don't really necessarily know where to be allocating that money after you've determined how much to spend. So the point of the spending portion of that was that the lifetime value ratio and knowing your customer acquisition costs is key to determining your marketing budget and therefore therefore giving clarity to what you should be doing with your marketing, at least at a base point, right? So I think a really great thing to talk about first would be, what is the lifetime value ratio?
So a lifetime value ratio measures the relationship between the lifetime value of a consumer and the cost of acquiring that consumer. That is how you arrive at a lifetime value ratio.
So then can you tell me what the lifetime value is and what the customer acquisition cost is and how they work together to determine the lifetime value ratio?
Yes, so I think the easiest way to do it is to kind of put a face on it. So let's just say that you are a business attorney and you are marketing a service to other, say, small businesses where the service you're marketing is going to be a reoccurring revenue for the year where you're going to get paid $1,000 a month for 12 months. A small business owner needs you for their year to rectify a situation. So let's look at the lifetime value of that client. So it's $1,000 per transaction, and you're going to run 12 transactions with that client. You're going to come out at $12,000 revenue. If your law firm runs at a 35% gross margin, you're going to come in for a lifetime value of $4,200. So again, we arrived at it this way. $1,000 per transaction times 12 transactions equals $12,000. Times 35%, again, is going to arrive you at $4,200 lifetime value of that client. Now, what did it cost to go obtain that client? That is what's called the CAC, or customer acquisition cost. Very simple math. It's taking up everything you're doing in marketing and sales and dividing that by the customers acquired. So let's just say that your law firm invested $25,000 in their customer acquisition cost, and they walked away with 20 new clients for the year. You arrived at a $1,250 customer acquisition cost. So if you basically divide $1,250 into what we just said, a minute ago, the lifetime value of $4,200, you would arrive at a 3.36 to 1 lifetime value ratio, which in theory would make your campaign running well and you're profiting and you're doing good.
So now that we understand the breakdown of what the LTV is, what the CAC is, and how it comes into the ratio and how it formulates into the ratio, could you sort of just explain to us what the customer acquisition cost is and what goes into calculating the customer acquisition cost?
Yeah, so I think this is probably the most underutilized number in business today, law firms, other things like that, and it's probably the most important number out there. You really need to know exactly what things cost to acquire. So if you want to be at $1 million, you have to identify what services or what areas of practice generate the highest revenue, generate the highest margins for you, and then know the numbers that you have to invest to obtain and hit your revenues. So the customer acquisition costs are broken up historically between two things. That's everything marketing and then everything sales. So within sales, if you have an individual who's selling stuff for you, you got to factor in their salary, you got to factor in entertainment with clients, you got to factor in fuel, whatever it may be. You have to factor in if they have a CRM like Salesforce or MyCase or something like that. And then you also have to add in your marketing. Marketing is everything from your internal marketing salaries, your email marketing platforms, any type of creative you're doing. Maybe you got a website done. And then the little nugget, the most important thing. which is how much money are you spending on platforms like Google and Facebook and Yahoo and Instagram? Because it's critical to really understand that percentage in the customer acquisition cost, because right there actually identifies whether you're going to succeed or not. And as we kind of go along and we continue to, move along this conversation, in your customer acquisition cost, if you do not have allocated 50% of that customer acquisition cost allocated to the top performing platforms along the buyer's journey, which again, Facebook/Google and their properties, your customer acquisition cost in this modern era is out of whack.
So we're talking about the customer acquisition cost, but I want to talk a little bit about the lifetime value ratio before sort of coming back to the customer acquisition costs, because we've determined what the customer acquisition cost is, but there's a chance that your customer acquisition cost could be too big, which is something we're going to get to. So why is the 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio ideal?
The 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio why is it ideal? I think there's 5 main factors to why this is something your company should be identifying as the key metric in your marketing campaign. It clearly shows the health of a business. Both investors and lenders really, really focus on this metric. From venture capitalists to banks to anybody else, this is the number one thing they look for. It shows a balanced business model. It was a major focus of softwares as a service type companies. So a lot of like startup companies and things like that, this was a major component that really showed the health of a company. It showed if you could scale a company. So an investor's like, well, if I'm going to invest in it, can I scale? If I see they're operating at a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, we can scale this business, this company's growing. What happened is a lot of service-based businesses like law firms and medical facilities actually started adapting this mentality to their own business sheet and realizing that if they were pushing their marketing campaigns towards a 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio, they noticed that their company was stabilizing and it was a healthy company. And the last thing that this does, which I think is one of the more important things, is it gets you to focus on the highly profitable services first, and it gets you to start entertaining that conversation as to where there are some services maybe you should pare back on. So it really laser focuses a company on not only what they should be selling, where they should be selling, and the investment that they should be doing to obtain revenue goals.
So we know why 3-to-1 is ideal, but what about the other ratios that aren't 3-to-1? So the first thing that comes to mind is, what about a client that has a 14-to-1 ratio after they come in and we talk to them and we all calculate it all for them?
I mean, if they're at a 14-to-1 ratio, there's a couple thoughts. Number one, when I see a customer, when they tell me their budget, or we look at their current campaign and they say they're comfortable with what they're spending and they're arriving at a 14-to-1 ratio, it's two things. Number one, they're at a company that they're not really looking to grow. They're kind of okay where they are. They're just looking to stay status quo. I don't really know of any companies that want to stay status quo, but 14-to-1 is a clear indicator that there is a problem in the campaign. They're not spending enough money. So even if they're succeeding right now, the problem is as the digital landscape is changing, as more money is getting poured into the market, you're going to realize that you're not spending enough money. So if there is a problem with the campaign, when I see 14-to-1, I'm not going in and saying, let's look at SEO, let's look at the content calendar, let's go look at impressions. I'm immediately coming in and saying, you're not spending enough money in your digital marketing campaign. You're not even remotely close. You need to be closer to 3-to-1.
So in a way, is it almost like if you are spending 14-to-1, you're just not taking full advantage of what a digital marketing campaign can offer you?
I would say 7 out of 10 times, because I do have to factor in 3 times if you're working with agencies may completely know nothing. They don't know what they're doing at all. But I'm assuming 70% of the agencies you're working with know what they're doing. If you come in and tell me that you're at 14-to-1, or if you come in and tell me that your campaign is failing or it's not doing well with the agency you're with or the internal marketing team you have, I'll immediately guess that you're probably at the bare minimum of a 14-to-1 ratio. That's the very first thing I'm going to look at is your spend. So that's, I don't know if that answered the question, but too many times, and this is a huge critical thing for potential customers of ours or anybody else to understand. The minute you look at your campaign failing, stop looking at all those other vanity metrics. Immediately go in and try to identify what the lifetime value ratio is. And if you're at 14-to-1, your campaign is not succeeding.
Yeah, I think that answered my question, because on paper you would think if I'm spending $1 and I'm getting $14, that's probably good. Yeah. But when you put it in context, if you're spending so little on your digital marketing campaign or even other marketing efforts, what you're really doing is you're losing out on all of the other money that you could be getting if you were spending closer to 3 to 1.
Yeah, I mean, there are companies that operate at a higher number. I think that I
Yeah.
just read that Salesforce is at 7 to 1. I think Netflix is like 8 to 9 to 1. Look, if you veer over there, that's okay. I'm not saying that 14 to 1 is bad. There's definitely companies that may be operating at a 14 to 1 are doing good. I'm just saying if you're looking to get to your revenue goals quicker, if you're looking to obtain more money in the bank faster, the closer you get to a 3 to 1 spend, the quicker you're going to get to hitting your goals. So we do have a client who's sitting at, I think they're 24% to 1, or I'm sorry, 24 to 1 ratio, and they don't have much more time to kind of wrap up a goal for the year that they're trying to get done. And they said, well, what do you think? And immediately it was, people were starting to strategize marketing. I said, please stop. Please stop all the strategy. It's clear that this is working. This comes down to, I'll even take 12 to 1. Let's cut it in half. Let's bring the spend to 12 to 1. And I nearly guarantee that you're going to hit your revenue a little quicker. And it's all is predicated on the other podcast we talked about, is that if we're moving to a paid world, if you know the platforms you have to be on, if you're spending the right amount of money, in theory, your campaign should succeed. That's kind of the whole premise of what we're doing here.
So then there's the flip side of having a 14 to 1, which is you're going closer to 1 to 1 or 2 to 1, which is you're spending too much or your customer acquisition cost is too high. So you can talk about that.
So there's two thoughts when you're at a 2 to 1 or a 1 to 1 or even say a negative 1 to 1. You may have a company that's in total growth mode, does not care about what's going on right now. They're just trying to grow their customer base because they know that they can market that customer base down the road and make money. So that's one of those getting people in for free trials. That's one of those, I just want to be able to obtain a client who I could say, I'm now their attorney and I gave them 5 hours of free business and I'm really losing money. But I know that business is going to come back to me starting in the next month or two because they're going to need help. So in other words, that is not a bad thing to be sometimes when you're in a growth mode. However, if you're not in a growth mode and you are trying to make more money, you're trying to wonder what is going on. If we were to look at your customer acquisition cost and your lifetime value and the ratio does arrive at 1 to 1, then yes, you are spending too much money. So it's for every dollar you're putting in, you're getting $1 back. That's not fundamentally good business.
So one of the things I want to mention with that when we're talking about customer acquisition costs is when you have your customer acquisition costs and you have your lifetime value and you have your lifetime value ratio, it helps you determine and look at things that are underperforming for you. And that's in general. Salaries, maybe if you're like running billboards or something and you're spending $10,000 or whatever. So can you you have no way of tracking that, right? So can you just talk a little bit about being able to then trim, if you have a really large customer acquisition cost that's clearly making you negative 1 to 1, 1 to 1, and you don't want to be there, how do you pare that down? What do you look at?
I think you have to start looking at it. And the conversation starts with, if you're not spending 50% of your customer acquisition costs on digital paid spend, again, you're actually buying ads on Google, you're buying ads on Facebook. If you're not spending that 50%, you could bake in some agency fees in there because SEO obviously is a play and email marketing campaigns is a play, so you can bake some money in there. But if you're not spending at least 50% and you're sitting at a 1 to 1 lifetime value ratio, it's at that point you have to look at your customer acquisition costs and say, all right, well, look, man, I'm only at 20% on digital marketing spend. I may have to lay off a salesperson or two. That billboard's probably not working for me. That radio ad's not working. I have this big, massive CRM that, my 5 salespeople are using, but we're still at 1 to 1 and we're not closing more business. It does really help you identify all the marketing decisions you're making, both from a marketing standpoint and from a sales standpoint, and identify underperformers. And the beauty of it, you can identify underperformers really quick. If you're sitting at a 1 to 1, it's going to be yelling at you and barking at you what you need to get rid of. So long as you understand, you start with 50% on paid digital. Then everything else you start looking at, and that's where you start whittling it down. And as you whittle it down, you move up to a 50% on your customer acquisition cost. At that point, you're going to start seeing yourself moving closer to a 3 to 1 ratio, so long as you're placing those ads across the right platforms, across the buyer's journey, which we'll talk about in another top podcast.
Now that we understand the lifetime value of a client and the customer acquisition cost that gets you at a 3 to 1 lifetime value ratio, how does that factor into reporting and what you want to see how your campaign is fully running?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of like That's a really good question. So I think the thing that you have to look at is one of the biggest issues we're facing right now in the digital marketing space is the reporting that agencies are giving clients, and we're at fault of it too. Like we just literally are wrapping up, getting rid of a platform that we've been using for the last 4 years, and we are now have a complete custom dashboard that completely caters to the 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio. And I think that is the major kicker right there, is that you're reporting everything you're looking at should whittle all the way down to where am I at? Am I at 3-to-1, 10-to-1, 1-to-1? Where am I at? And then once you understand that, then you could step back and then maybe have a little bit of a conversation about SEO and pay-per-click and all that. But it's trying to understand that your digital marketing campaign and your marketing campaign, the reporting should lay directly on top of your balance sheet, make complete sense in everything you're doing. The reports you're handing out now, rankings, conversions, traffic, you look at that next to a balance sheet, they're like two totally separate entities. They couldn't talk to each other in any way, shape, or form. I know that there's some platforms right now that are trying to fuse a lot of that together. I understand that there's a lot of automation and there's a lot of great data reporting out there that is tying this together. But there is a lack of reporting that agencies are showing and going to a client saying you're at a 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio. So how do you use that as a tool? So let's just say that same lawyer came to us. We built out a campaign, and the campaign was, you're trying to grab $12,000 off, Jenny. She's a shop owner. Your lifetime value is $4,200. And then the law firm comes to us and says, you know what, this is great. We want to open up another office, and we want to go do it down in Delaware, and we want to really market this service. Well, now you know exactly what you have to do to go market to those people down there, as we'll touch on that in the buyer's journey. But it's not knowing what it is, it's actually knowing the investment. Now you know how much it costs. Having your marketing campaign run at a 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio, making that your singular goal to get to that, gives you a tool that your competitors do not have. You now at this point have gained a competitive advantage because you know anytime you walk into a market, anytime you're looking to go and expand out an area of practice or whatever you're doing in business, you know exactly what it's going to cost you. You're never in your life going to say, throw a number at me. If you make money, I make money. You're going to bring an agency in, they're going to sit down, or you're going to bring your own marketing team in, and you're going to say, it costs this, we got to put this across the buyer's journey. My goal is 3-to-1. And that 3-to-1 is going to get us XYZ revenue. So I think hopefully that answers the question, but that's kind of all where this bakes down to, where marketing has to be a conversation of how much actual money did I make based upon the investment I put in. Please stop having conversations of, I don't see myself when I Google myself. It's really not doing yourself a service. It's driving your agency crazy and you're losing money, and the ultimate goal is to get your law firm or business money.
Absolutely. And I think, we talked a lot today about determining costs, figuring out values, and we've sort of finished off here now knowing if you have your lifetime value ratio, if you're aiming 3-to-1, if you're spending 50% to 60%, 65% of your marketing budget on digital marketing, you are going to be well on your way to achieving that 3-to-1 lifetime value ratio. But something that's important to keep in mind is you can't just throw money at Facebook and Google and expect it to work the way you want. You need to think of a strategy, or you need an agency to come and think of a strategy and determine where your money in that budget is best spent. And that is where we go and start beginning to discuss the buyer's journey, the namesake of this podcast, which is the journey that a potential customer client are going to take into hopefully buying your product, paying for your service, etc. And that is what we're going to talk about on the next episode of our podcast. So check out the next episode. It should be up already if you are listening to this one, and you'll be able to listen to how we talk about the buyer's journey, what it is, how helpful it is, and the different platforms that go into it, and why it is so crucial to know your marketing budget first and then go into the next steps onto the buyer's journey. So that's all for today's episode of The Buyer's Journey. Check us out on Comexis.com, YouTube, and anywhere you can get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter at buyers_journey. Thanks for listening.